Third question of exercise 1.3. Prove that the following are irrational number. 1 upon root 2, 7 root 5 and 6 plus root 2. Firstly, we solve first part. 1 upon root 2 is irrational. We have to prove that 1 upon root 2 is an irrational number. Let us assume that 1 upon root 2 is rational. We prove this by contradict method. Means we firstly we assume that this is a rational number. Then we can find co-prime x and y does not equal to 0 such that 1 upon root 2 is equal to x upon y. In rational numbers, we have co-prime numbers x and y does not equal to 0. So we write 1 upon root 2 is equal to x upon y. When we rearrange this, we get root 2 is equal to y upon x. X and y are integers. X and y are integers. Thus, x and y are integers. Thus, root 2 is a rational. Is a rational number, which contradicts the fact that root 2 is irrational. We know that root 2 is irrational, but in this method we prove that root 2 is rational. So it contradicts that root 2 is irrational. Hence we can conclude that 1 upon root 2 is irrational. Means root 2 is irrational, so 1 upon root 2 is also irrational. Second part, 7 root 5. Like first part, let us assume that 7 root 5 is rational number. First of all, we assume that 7 root 5 is rational number. Then we can find co-prime x and y does not equal to 0 such that 7 root 5 is equal to x upon y. When we rearrange this, root 5 is equal to x upon 7y. X and y are integers. Thus, root 5 is also a rational number. Which contradicts the fact that root 5 is irrational. Means it contradicts, it's opposite the fact that root 5 is irrational number. Hence we can conclude that 7 root 5 is irrational. Third one. Now we solve the third part, 6 plus root 2. Like first two sums, let us assume that 6 plus root 2 is a rational number. Then we can find co-prime x and y does not equal to 0 such that 6 plus root 2 is equal to x upon y. Now rearranging this number, root 2 is equal to xy minus 6. X and y are integers. X and y are integers. Thus, root 2 is rational number, because xy upon minus 6 is rational number. If right hand side is rational, then left hand side is also rational. So root 2 is also a rational number. But this contradicts the fact that root 2 is irrational. Hence, we can conclude that we can conclude that 6 plus root 2 is irrational. So we prove all the 3 questions with contradict that these numbers are irrational numbers.